Now we're going to take a ride on the Reading to discover how Jerry Strangarity has made the sights of Pennsylvania come to life with his structure modeling.
Everyone thinks of model railroading differently. For some, it's about collecting specific engines and cars. For others, it's about recreating a particular moment in time. And for Jerry Strangarity, it's all about structure modeling. Jerry has been modeling since he was a kid growing up near the Reading Railroad in Pennsylvania.
He used a lot of Victorian architecture, a lot of gingerbread trim. In building models of structures like that, I find that it's challenging and it's a lot of fun to try and recreate that type of thing. And another thing I liked about the Reading Railroad was the type of land that it traversed. It went everywhere from the coal regions in upper Pennsylvania through the hilly areas, the farm areas, the urban areas like Reading, Pennsylvania, and down to Philadelphia where you had the waterfront. So you have a little bit of everything. And from a modeling standpoint for model railroading, there's a lot there to keep your interest.
Jerry's skills at modeling led him to create a version of downtown Philadelphia that's filled with details, both large and small. Since Philadelphia is the biggest city that the Reading services, it makes sense that it takes up such a large amount of Jerry's layout, with an area that's 16 feet long by 3 feet wide. To get there, Jerry's HO scale Reading Railroad rides through a tunnel, passes the Texaco oil refinery, then commercial and residential areas, and finally, downtown. One of the most unusual buildings is this 2-deck ice plant that the railroad used for refrigeration cars. Jerry's still working on the Reading Terminal Passenger Station and its downtown setting. He likes to add lots of details to make his models look realistic, including barrels and piles of junk. Most of the buildings are scratch-built and based on real Philadelphia landmarks. Not many people can just look at a picture of a building and then model it without first making detailed plans. But Jerry does this all the time. He's modeled buildings after pictures in magazines, like this corner bar, or photographs he's taken himself, this classic Wagon Works building. He's even modeled a building based upon stories his grandfather told him.
Well, many years ago, I was talking to my grandfather about his early days working as a kid in Reading, Pennsylvania. And he was telling me he used to work at the Reading Company car shops. And he was describing the conditions that he worked under, dirt floors and long hours and that sort of thing. And I began to think that this would be neat to build a model of something like that. So I put all those ideas together in my head and drew up some plans and built a model.
But just because Jerry likes to focus on modeling doesn't mean he's ignored the railroad part of his model railroad. He hand-laid most of the layout's tracks and cut tens of thousands of ties. When it's completed, the layout will represent the Reading Railroad in the 1930s and 1940s. A fan of the steam era, Jerry has paid particular attention to the signals.
The signals, one at each end of the city, are modeled from actual Reading Company blueprints, and they're an odd sort of signal. They're called Hall banjo signals, and they were used almost exclusively on the Reading. And the Reading used them even up into the 50s, so they were a common sight on the Reading, and when you see a banjo signal like that, it speaks Reading.
Some modelers might think even Jerry's modeling materials and techniques have a touch of nostalgia to them. Even though so many modelers have changed over to plastic and other man-made materials, Jerry still relies on good old-fashioned cardstock.
I have people that come here and see the layout, and I tell them I'm still using cardstock, and they look at me like I'm crazy. But then they're intrigued and want to know a lot more about it. Back in the 50s, cardstock was the mainstay of model building. In the days before styrene and other materials came on board. Cardstock is, well, for one thing, it's cheap. And when I started modeling, of course, I was a kid, and we didn't have a lot of money to go buy trains. So if I wanted something, I had to build it. And cardstock is also easy to work with. It's easy to cut window openings and so forth out with a knife. And it's just a versatile, easy material to work with.
Now that the Philadelphia modeling is almost complete, Jerry is looking forward to finishing up the rest of the layout. He's planning on creating a large area that will depict the Pennsylvania coal mining country.
I'm looking forward to that because I've been spending quite a few years building just city with lots of buildings, and now I want to build some mountains. So I think the coal regions will be my next project.